Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome. Today's episode is on karma. And what I'm going to talk about today is an episode that happened in my life that actually took me 50 years to figure out. It was started by something that I did as a teenager and was paid back to me 30 something years later, perhaps. I'm not sure exactly, maybe 27, I don't know. But then I still didn't get it. It took me a while to figure it out. And then it didn't really dawn on me until, late 2023, 2024, that, this thing has actually happened. So that is the name of the presentation, from ha ha, because it did start out as a joke, to aha, I finally got it. It took me 50 years, but I'm a little slow on the uptake, but what the hey. So, how did it begin? Let's talk about the sowing of the seed. I learned very young that if I wanted things in the material world, I had to work. I had to go in and get a job and earn money in order to purchase that which I so desired. And what this did, it led me down the path of many, many adventures. I first started out as a young teenager, collecting aluminum cans. I was right at the onset where the cans were transitioning into aluminum. Consequently, I was able to find a lot of them, and I collected them and turned them in and made a little bit of money. I then got a paper route. I was a paper boy, and the afternoons would find me rolling up papers and hopping on my little bicycle and driving, walking, actually not driving or walking, but pedaling my happy little self around town, tossing papers on people's lawns and porches. Well, I decided I wanted a motorcycle. And being that my paper route was in the evenings and my uncle had gas stations, I did some daily work at the gas station. And I went in there and I started to learn that until I had enough money to actually buy a motorcycle. Unfortunately, my dad floated the loan, signed a note at the bank, and made me pay for it. And I finally got my scooter and off I was delivering papers on my motorcycle. Now, the time that I was working at the gas station was crucial to this story because it was here that I met a man named JB. And he ran the station for my uncle, and he was a poor black man. He probably in his 60s back here, and we're talking early 70s. So he was probably in his 60s and around that time. And he was a big man. He stood about 6'4", 250, and his fist was as big as my head. But he was a truly gentle giant, a big man, but very, very mild mannered. And I never really learned much of his history, but I believe one time he told me he didn't get much past the sixth grade. And, as a black man living in the South post World War II, the opportunities for him were probably few and in between, and they weren't very fruitful, those that did come his way. But he did what he could to find work for his wife and raise a family. And I enjoyed my time with him and his wife, Christy. Now, as a kid, I was on the ornery sort. All right. I liked to joke around a lot, and I always seemed to be in a hurry doing things. And JB was always trying to get me to focus on quality and not the quantity, and to just do things, do it right and learn from them. And he was a very good tutor for me. He helped me a lot. But again, I was just being, ornery. And over the years that we worked together, I grew very fond of him. And over time, when I was about 16 or so, things started to change a little bit. I left the gas station business to join the oil field. because in the oil fields, that's where he was making the money. And I mean, some good money in 1973, 74. And about that same time, the regulatory environment changed and EPA regulations came in, and my uncle ended up selling his interest in the gas station. So he got rid of them, and consequently, JB was out of a job. But he got hired on by the local school system, and I'd see him in and around the schools when I was in my junior and senior year. So I never was totally lost contact with him, but it was all right. It was good. So one summer morning, I'm out there scooting around on my motorcycle, and lo and behold, I see old JB getting out of a brand new Lincoln. Nice looking car. And so I figured I'd go over there and check it out. So I zipped around, went over there, and when I hopped in there, I noticed that the car was running, and Christy, his wife, was in the seat. So being the ornery little kid that I am, I just hopped in the driver's seat and took off. I drove around the block. I was gone maybe a minute. Okay. And that's what we did. So when I got back, JB standing there and he's looking at me. And remember, his fist is big as my head. So I hopped out, with a stupid smile on my face. Hey, nice car, man. Something to that effect. And he just glared at me. He goes, Stevie, you little shit. Give me a cigarette. And that was always saying to me, give me a cigarette. Because I had them, and I was smoking at that time. And, so I gave them to him, and he just, he calmed down. He didn't kill me at the time, which was good. So anyhow, when I got back there, I looked at, his car, and it was a really, really pretty car. I mean, it was one of those, it was a Lincoln Mark IV, dark blue, white Landau roof. And it had that big extended front end and had that 460 engine in it. I mean, this thing was a machine, man. That thing was nice. He did good. I really, really liked that car. I mean, so it was gone. But anyhow, at that point, by me hopping in there and going for a little round the block joyride that lasted about a minute, I sowed some seeds. Didn't know it, but I did. So let's talk about the reaping of that huge sow. Well, fast forward 27 years. Here it is, early 2001. I'm going through a divorce and, seeking companionship. I sought out a new girlfriend and I found her. Long story short, I, met this lady. We started dating. She was a very beautiful woman, long blonde hair, smart, thinker, educated, total proof that opposites attract. Okay. And she was good. She was a very, very fine woman. And, talking to her, I knew that she had some, she'd been down some rocky roads and life hadn't been totally, good to her. And, the thing about it is that she wasn't afraid to put herself out there. And, vulnerabilities be damned, she was out there doing what she had to do in order to get by. And she did, and she was fearless. And I totally admire her for that. And, sadly to say that I never really gave her a fair shake, okay, because that's just what I was at this point in time. And it really wasn't a very long relationship, but we did, did spend some time together, and a lot of discontent, primarily because I was, and didn't know it, selfish at the time. And I could always see her. I mean, she would let me know about it. She'd be standing there, had her hand on her hip, giving me hairy eyeballs, and said, "You're such an ass." And she was right. She's 100% right. I was. And I wasn't seeing things. I wasn't framing the relationship in a fair and equitable position. I was solely self-engrossed. I was quite selfish, and I just lived for personal gratification. Is what it is. That's how I was at that time. That was 20 years ago. And I was also, prone to drinking back then too. And I really didn't, get overly carried away so much. But again, anytime alcohol's involved, invariably things get a little bit tense and not so much fun. So off we go. Now, I got transferred out here to Arizona from Texas. And when I came out here, the company I was working for, I had a company vehicle. I had a nice forest grain Suburban. And so when I got transferred out, I hopped in and I took it out there with me. And I used it as my own personal vehicle. That was not bad. So after I got out here, I got the phone call one day from the dentist office because I failed to finish all the dental work I had in progress in Texas. You know, I was so excited to get out here. And so I got a call. I had to go get a tooth stuck in my head. So girlfriend and I loaded up and hopped in the Suburban and off we went. I went back to Texas to go get, crown put in my head. So like I said, things were, getting kind of strained at this point, and trip really wasn't that much fun for either of us, primarily because of my attitude. And on the way back, we stopped in New Mexico. It was about halfway, so it was a good place to stop and rest for the night. And got in there, and next morning, get up ready to go. Hopped to grab the bags, hopped outside. The damn Suburban wasn't there. Suburban wasn't where I put it, man. It was missing. And this sent me into a full-blown panic, man. I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off because I knew that all I could think of is that I had to inform the company that I just managed to get their property stolen in New Mexico, which I shouldn't have been there with the company vehicle at that time. And as a result, it would probably end up costing me my job, which means I would not have any income. And if I didn't have any income, then I wouldn't be able to get another vehicle to get another job. And, never mind the house payment that I had to make at that time. So, I was, totally engulfed with fear from doing these types of things. I was totally self-absorbed and just freaking out because, I allowed fear to take control of my thinking processes. But, all along, what I really couldn't figure out, even though I do it, I mean, this is how much fear was moving, was that I had the keys. The keys were there, but the truck was gone. So girlfriend, being the smart one of the bunch, suggested that, well, why don't you just walk around and see if you left it somewhere? Maybe maybe you had, of the 3 beers you had last night, maybe 2 of them just knocked you on your tush and you forgot where you parked it. So I did. I went up there and I got it and walked around, and lo and behold, I found it. It was on the other side of the motel. Well, hopped in, drove it back around, went back to the room, and somebody sitting there with a, big smirk on their face, grinning. Seeing what happened, that evil girlfriend, when I was indisposed, moved it and didn't tell me. I was greatly relieved that all of my fears were, founded on nothing, but I damn sure wasn't amused. And that was, pretty much the end of the relationship. So let's connect some dots here. Hopping back into our little time machine, it's now, 21 years in the future. We're here 2023, 24-ish. And a lot of personal changes have happened to me over the time. And I got into the Cayce readings, most notably, and that really helped me a lot to come to a deeper understanding of myself and what I was doing and whatnot. And a lot of the things that I found were some self-evident truths that, if I wasn't so myopic in my thinking, that I would have figured out a long time ago. Nowadays, I use the readings as a backdrop to, think about things. And I'm basically applying new information to old situations, and I come to, some context of what the heck happened. Sometimes the concepts come easy, you figure it out. Yeah, that makes sense. Other times you kind of got to noodle it and think about, what's going on, and let the information float about in the mind there until it attracts something that, you've read recently and it adheres, and then you have an aha moment. And so that's kind of what I was doing here. And this is how I connected the dots between two seemingly dissimilar events and what they really meant. I was, really wasn't into the karma thinking back in 2000, the early 2000s. But with the Cayce readings coming in, and I was now able to say, aha, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess, when the student is ready, the teacher will, in fact, show up. That was my case. But the seed that lay dormant in my mind for so long and all these years is how I made JB feel. When he walked out of that store and his car was gone and his wife was gone, how did it make him feel? My actions had to have terrified him. And I just always thought of it as a joke. It was never my intention to do that. Regardless, I did. And this is now when I start to think about it with this new information, from the readings and whatnot, I see that I had the fear in my heart when the girlfriend hijacked my truck that I put into JB's when I went on my little joyride. Truly, I had indeed reaped what I had sown. And universal law has been fulfilled. So my lessons here that I learned is that I had to really come to appreciate the pain that I put JB through. And, even though karma says, eye for eye, tooth for a tooth type of thing, in this case, it really wasn't the material, his car, my car, joke, the similarities there. But the true karma was the emotional feelings attached to the act. The physical act caused the emotions, and the emotions get you attention because that's what you mean most. And, it was, my selfishness that led to a lot of things. I was just doing this as a joke, but when I think back and, I'd look at the disintegration of, the relationship with the girlfriend and not to mention 2 previous marriages, well, that was me, guilty as charged, selfishness. And that's kind of what I'm working on next is to come up with, selfishness because, we all are. And that's what Cayce said. Selfishness is the only sin. And when you take 10 commandments, 7 deadly sins, whatever, you can go in and just do it. And that's what you're going to be looking at. So you look at it and say, okay, how am I being selfish? So one of the things that I did learn is that if we don't know it, then you're going to continue to repeat it because our shortcomings are kind of like things that we keep in our own personal skeleton closet. And as long as they're in there, you're going to continue to do and engage in poor behavior. And you're going to end up doing the same thing that you always done. So in order to fix that, you've got to awaken yourself within. And when you do, you start to make small little victories in overcoming ourselves. And I'm doing some research now on another presentation I'm going to do, like I said, on selfishness. And one of the things that I've learned is that a recurring theme for the origins is that it's past lives. So, what we are today is probably who we were very close in the past. Excuse me. Undoubtedly, the girlfriend probably thought I was an ass back then too. And she was probably right, if this is any deal. And, I feel remorse for hurting the people that I have, both intentionally and unintentionally. But I've learned, to isolate a part of my destructive behavior. Once I've identified it, now I can work it. So once I've got that behind me, now I can take steps to fix it and hopefully become a better person in the future. All this started back when the Cayce was going on, Cayce materials. Now, one final note here. Back in 1995, I drove by JB's house. I'd always stop in when I was in the Navy. I'd go by and see him, and he'd give me his, "You little shit, give me a cigarette," and we'd sit outside and smoke and whatnot. He never drank, probably a good thing. But I went by his house and knocked on the door. It didn't look like there were no cars there, so didn't think he was home. So I took my business card out. I wrote a little note on it, stuck in his door. As I turned around and was walking away, I looked out in the pasture, and there I saw a blue Lincoln rusting out. And I knew right then and there I'd never see JB again. And I didn't. But I did have a lot of good conversations with him in the making of this presentation. And we had a good time together and didn't even have a cigarette. But anyhow, 50 years, and that's how it went. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.